The contentious civil rights movement of the 1960s catapulted Birmingham into the national spotlight in the worst way. September 15th, 1963, the world saw the deadly effects of that change firsthand with the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. At 10:22 that Sunday morning, explosives rocked the church. In the aftermath, 4 innocent lives were lost. Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carole Robertson, and Denise McNair, all killed in that blast, none of them older than 14 years old.
Today, we shine light on the victims of the tragic case of the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. Birmingham, Alabama, 1963. At the height of the Civil Rights Movement, it was considered the most segregated city in America. Known then as Birmingham due to more than 50 dynamite attacks that occurred in the city between the years of 1947 and 1965. Targeting black residents. Each explosion carried a clear message of hate, aimed at black families moving into white neighborhoods and anyone daring to challenge segregation. The city was scarred by violence, and under the notorious rule of Public Safety Commissioner Eugene Connor, Birmingham became infamous worldwide for unleashing dogs, the use of fire hoses, and brutal violence on peaceful demonstrators. For black residents, even the act of gathering in church carried risk, yet the 16th Street Baptist Church stood as a refuge. For black families, it was more than a house of worship. It was a safe haven, the headquarters of hope, and the beating heart of Birmingham's civil rights movement. But on the morning of September 15th, safety was disrupted and hope was shattered. 4 little girls, dressed in their Sunday best, prepared for youth service. Moments later, an explosion tore through the basement. Addie Mae Collins, Denise McNair, Carole Robertson, and Cynthia Wesley, all gone in an instant. The tragedy would shock the nation and force the world to look into the mirror and face the reflection of its own hate. Addie Mae Collins was born on April 18, 1949 in Birmingham, Alabama, to Oscar and Alice Collins. One of 7 children, Addie grew up in a close-knit family where church played a central role. She was a regular at the 16th Street Baptist Church, active in its youth programs, and known for her devotion to faith. A student at Bernetta C. Hill Elementary, Addie balanced academics with her love of sports, especially softball. Friends remember her as outgoing, warm, and full of energy. On Sunday morning, September 15, 1963, Addie was just 14 years old when her life was tragically cut short. Carole Robertson was born April 24, 1949, the youngest of 3 children of Alpha and Alvin Robertson. She grew up in Birmingham's Smithfield neighborhood and was deeply involved in both school and community life. A straight-A student at Parker High School, Carole played in the marching band, joined the science club, and sang in the choir. She loved to read and dance and was active in both Girl Scouts and the team group of Jack and Jill of America. Known for her quiet determination and dedication, Carole regularly attended 16th Street Baptist Church with her family and took part in youth programs. On Sunday, September 15, 1963, she was just 14 years old when her dreams were interrupted. Cynthia Wesley was born April 30, 1949 to a single mother, whose name is unknown, in Birmingham, Alabama. For the chance at a stronger education and home life, she was adopted by Claude and Gertrude Wesley, both teachers, who raised her with care and discipline in Birmingham's Smithfield neighborhood. Cynthia was gifted in music. She played both the clarinet and the piano, and she dreamed of becoming a teacher herself. At Human High School, she excelled in math and reading, earning a reputation as a bright and motivated student. She was also a devoted member of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where she participated in youth programs alongside her friends. On September 15, 1963, Cynthia was 14 years old when her promising life was stolen. Denise McNair was born November 17, 1951, in Birmingham, Alabama, to Christopher McNair, a photographer who later served in the state legislature, and Maxine McNair, a school teacher. She was the couple's only child at the time. Denise was described as outgoing, lively, and creative. She was a student at Central Street Elementary, where she performed in plays and dance recitals, and also a member of the Brownies. Known for her bright spirit, Denise had many childhood friends, one being Condoleezza Rice, who would later become U.S. Secretary of State. Deeply rooted in her church, Denise regularly attended the 16th Street Baptist Church with her family and participated in youth activities. Often remembered as the baby of the four girls, Denise was just 11 years old when her life was tragically taken on that Sunday morning, September 15, 1963. The 16th Street Baptist Church was built in 1911. The large red brick church sat downtown, only a few blocks from the city's commercial district and city hall. Its size, location, and influence made it the ideal headquarters for the Civil Rights Organization. And by the 1960s, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy, and Fred Shuttlesworth used the church as a hub for strategy sessions, rallies, and marches. Despite some hesitation from church leaders and members, the congregation ultimately aligned with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, becoming central for the desegregation campaign known as Project C, which stood for confrontation, which was a series of nonviolent boycotts and demonstrations designed to challenge segregation in Birmingham. As a result, its prominence also made the church a target. The 16th Street Baptist Church came to symbolize both the courage of the Civil Rights Movement and the hatred it faced for those who violently opposed change. Sunday, September 15, 1963, was Youth Day at the 16th Street Baptist Church, the largest black congregation in Birmingham, Alabama. Children and teenagers were leading the service that morning, while parents and community members filled the pews in support. Reverend John Cross, the church's pastor, presided over the day's events. Downstairs in the church's basement bathroom were 5 young girls: Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carole Robertson, Denise McNair, and Sarah Collins, Addie's 12-year-old sister, all gathered as they prepared their choir robes for the morning program. At 10:22 a.m., an anonymous male caller phoned the church, quoting 3 minutes to the teenage secretary before hanging up. Less than a minute later, a bomb that was planted beneath the church steps exploded with devastating force. The blast tore through the building, shattering walls, blowing out stained glass windows, and filling the sanctuary with smoke and flying debris. Panic swept through the congregation as worshipers scrambled to escape while desperately seeking their children. While many managed to escape, 5 girls were trapped in the basement restroom. 4 of the girls, Addie, Cynthia, Carole, and Denise, were unalived instantly, their bodies found mutilated and huddled together beneath the wreckage. The 5th girl, Sarah Collins, although clinging to life, miraculously survived. Sarah's injuries were life-altering. She was left blind in one eye, with particles of glass still lodged in her face and chest. Yet beyond the physical injuries, the emotional weight of the tragedy would follow her for years to come. She would never be the same. In addition, 21 others sustained injuries but ultimately survived the explosion.
It was an act of terror and a turning point in the civil rights movement that shocked the country.
September 15th, early Sunday morning in Birmingham, Alabama, the Ku Klux Klan set bombs and dynamite outside of the 16th Street Baptist Church. and ended up blowing a hole in the church. Not only did they blow a hole into the side of the church, but they murdered 4 young girls.
This was no accident. It was an act of domestic terrorism carried out by members of the KKK. The victims, dressed in their Sunday best, were targeted not for anything that they had done, but for who they were and where they were. Black children inside the 16th Street Baptist Church, the heart of Birmingham's civil rights movement. Civil rights leaders immediately condemned the atrocity. Dr. Martin Luther King called it the most vicious and tragic crime ever perpetrated against humanity, declaring that the bomb revealed to the entire world the true face of racism in America. The bombing sent shockwaves throughout Birmingham and across the nation. It only came months after the Birmingham campaign, a series of marches, sit-ins, and boycotts that had forced the city to agree to desegregate lunch counters, restrooms, drinking fountains, and fitting rooms. Also to hire black employees in retail stores and to release the protesters that had been jailed. But white segregationists answered the movement with violence and rage. Between March and September of 1963, Birmingham endured a wave of terror. At least 7 bombings rattled black neighborhoods, and countless beatings and acts of police brutality against black citizens were reported. The church bombing was not only an assault on a house of worship, it was a direct attack on the civil rights movement itself, a brutal attempt to silence the voices calling for justice. President John F. Kennedy, just months before his own assassination, condemned the act as one of the most vicious and tragic crimes of the struggle for the civil rights. However, the attack galvanized the movement. 3 days later, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. delivered the eulogy for Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Denise McNair at a joint funeral service attended by more than 8,000 mourners. A separate service was held for Carole Robertson. In his message, Reverend King reminded the grieving community that the girls' lives were not lost in vain. He called upon friends and family, as well as the community at large, to cast bitterness from their hearts and turn away from the desire for vengeance.
And so I stand here to say this afternoon to all assembled here that in spite of the darkness of this hour, we must not despair. We must not become bitter, nor must we harbor the desire to retaliate with violence.
The outrage over the girls' unaliving intensified support for civil rights legislation, laying the foundation for what would become the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Yet justice was painfully slow for the 4 young girls. Although FBI identified suspects almost immediately, no one was brought to trial at the time. Instead, 3 men were only charged with illegally purchasing and transporting dynamite. Each received a $100 fine and a suspended jail sentence, a shocking miscarriage of justice. Over the years, names of suspects circulated, but no prosecutions followed. In 1968, the FBI formally closed its investigation, and J. Edgar Hoover ordered the case files to be sealed to effectively bury the evidence. It wasn't until 1977, 14 years after the bombing, that progress was finally made. Newly elected Alabama Attorney General William Baxley requested access to the original FBI files. That year, Robert Chambliss, a known member of the KKK, was brought to trial. At 73 years old, he was convicted of the unaliving of 11-year-old Denise McNair and sentenced to life in prison. The judge, however, ruled that he would not be charged with the unaliving of the other 3 girls. Robert Chambliss passed away in prison on October 29, 1985, at the age of 81. Decades later, new evidence surfaced. On May 16, 2000, after previously sealed FBI files were unsealed and were never presented to Attorney General William Baxley. 3 more accomplices were named: Herman Cash, Thomas Blanton, and Bobby Frank Cherry. Herman Cash had already passed away in 1994, but Thomas Blanton and Bobby Cherry were still alive. Nearly 40 years after the bombing, both men were indicted by an Alabama grand jury. In the years 2001 and 2002, Thomas Blanton and Bobby Frank Cherry were both convicted of 4 counts of first-degree unaliving and sentenced to life in prison. Bobby Cherry passed away November 18, 2004, at the age of 74, and Thomas Blanton passed away on June 26, 2020, at the age of 82. The 16th Street Baptist Church bombing left wounds that time has never erased. This tragedy became a turning point in history and made it impossible for America to continue ignoring the violence that had long targeted Black lives. The unaliving of 4 innocent children remains one of the most infamous acts of racial terror in the United States history. They were daughters, students, and friends. Ordinary girls with extraordinary potential. Each had their own dreams, talents, and personalities. Yet their only crime was being born Black. And for that, their futures were stolen by racism and hate. Their stories remind us that hatred knows no limit. And while remembrance is not only important, but powerful. The song Birmingham Sunday, recorded by Joan Baez, was released in 1964, a ballad that memorialized the young girls. In 1997, a Spike Lee documentary film on the bombing called 4 Little Girls was released. In 2013, the Four Spirit statue was unveiled and is located in front of the 16th Street Baptist Church. In just 3 days, it will mark 62 years since this tragedy. May we never forget. Addie Mae Collins, Carole Robertson, Cynthia Wesley, and Denise McNair. I pray that you each rest in peace. Sending my deepest condolences and prayers to the family and friends. Until next time, thank you for watching Shades of Crime. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And remember to pray. God's listening.